Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lauren Barnes, and I am the Director of Programming and the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion team with the American Bar Association Young Lawyers Division. Welcome to our program, Parental Leave in the Legal Field, Managing Employer and Employee Expectations. Our discussion today will be followed by an opportunity for the audience to ask questions. So if you do have a question, please type it in the chat and we will reserve time at the end of our program to address them. We have a great program for you all today with amazing panelists that I am very honored to host today. First, we have David Pardo with the New Mexico Office of the Attorney General. David is an Assistant Attorney General, a position he took on in the beginning of 2023 as part of the administration of Raul Torres. David handles the agency's public record request and other general counsel type roles. Previously, he served in a similar capacity as a deputy district attorney for the Bernalillo County District Attorney's Office in Albuquerque under DA Torres's leadership. David has two boys, George and Ezra, both born while David was at the DA's office. George, 5, was born prematurely, and the office worked with David to provide paid parental leave so he could focus on the health of his son. Ezra's birth also involved paid leave. David is a 2008 graduate of Georgetown University Law Center. Next, we have Alicia Rico Flores, an attorney at the law firm of Flores Menegakis LLC, and Deputy Director of South Carolina for Criminal Justice Reform. Alicia Rica Flores is an attorney at the law firm, and her work focuses on transforming the criminal justice system in South Carolina through policy reform, education, and legal representation. Alicia is a former administrative judge for the City of Charleston Municipal Court in Charleston, South Carolina. She also has prior legal experience as a prosecutor, criminal defense attorney, and immigration attorney. She is passionate about advancing criminal justice reform initiatives and addressing racial and economic disparities in our criminal legal system. Alicia rarely passes up an opportunity to raise awareness about these issues through community outreach and education. Next, we have Megan Mason. Megan is an associate at Burns White LLC and the firm's healthcare and long-term care practice group, and is located in the Cherry Hill, New Jersey office. Ms. Mason focuses her practice on defending long-term care providers and medical care professionals against medical malpractice, professional liability, and general liability claims. Ms. Mason recently took parental leave in 2022 and balances her work life with her role as a mom of 2. Last but not least, we have Huda Rafai Bash Jawash. Huda is an intellectual property litigator with IP law firm Lerner David in New Jersey. She is also the current president of the NJMLA and a mother of 2 children. Huda started her career in big law alongside her first child, who she had the week of her 3L finals at Columbia Law School. Despite having 2 kids, she has never taken formal parental leave. So she will tell you all about why that is and what she's learned along the way from raising her own family, as well as mentoring and supporting other attorneys starting and expanding their families. So with that, I want to give a warm welcome to David, Alicia, Megan, and Huda. Thank you for being with us today. All right, so we're gonna hop right in, and the first question is, have any of you experienced any challenges, a lack of awareness, or assumptions because of your parental status? And if you have, how did you address it? We can start with Alicia.
Hi, thank you, Ms. Barnes. I would have to say a resounding yes. When I had my first child, I was an attorney at the state attorney's office in Miami-Dade County, Florida. And I would say that experience was actually a good experience when it came going through the pregnancy process, leaving for maternity leave, and then returning. I felt the office was very understanding about our workloads and what all it being a new parent encompassed. And so we were, you had the opportunity or the choice to be in a different division while in order to transition back into the workplace. After that, though, I think after that particular position, when I had my second child, which was an entire decade between the first child. And so when I have so they're like 10 and 20 now. So that's how I keep up with their ages, is like 20, 30, 40, 10, 20. And so I think it was a little bit more of a lack of awareness in that particular position. There was no offer, we're gonna allow you to transition back in, so we're going to provide you with additional coverage. We understand if you have to leave early. We understand if there's illnesses, and having a backup ready when that happens. I always felt like I was kind of scrambling, and I don't think it was intentional. I think it was just a level of unconsciousness and a lack of awareness surrounding those first few months back at work, because I was back at work after 6 weeks. I got notified in writing, come back to work on such and such a date, or you need to contact HR and state why you can't be back at work. And so I was like, wow, okay, I guess I'm going back to work. You're like 2 weeks from now. And it's very difficult. And I don't feel like that was probably the most sensitive way to approach me with, that I guess requirement. And so, but once again, I don't think it was intentional. I think it just was a lack of consciousness, a lack of awareness surrounding all of the responsibilities, which I'm not even going to get into. This panel full well knows all of the responsibilities that come with those first few months of child rearing. Getting up, I breastfed, so I'm up at 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, pumping, trying to get the bottles ready for daycare, because I have to, drop off and go to work. So, but yeah, I would more characterize it as a lack of awareness, lower level of consciousness regarding new parents.
Thanks for sharing that perspective. I definitely can agree with the lack of awareness. Like, being a parent, especially a first-time parent, is an adjustment. And it doesn't seem like the first 6 weeks are enough. You're just getting your bearings together of raising a human being, and then having to go back to work. And then you have to just basically pick up where you left off, performing at the level that you were performing at. That can be very stressful. And I agree. Sometimes companies and firms, they lack awareness in how much goes, into that. So thank you for sharing that perspective. So Megan, I have a question for you. What's the difference between taking parental leave and having parental leave? And how do firms look at it?
Sure. So what I've noticed is there seems to be a trend that big law firms are improving their benefits policies on paper, making these very generous parental leave policies, which I think are in place to attract, top attorneys to their firms. When I told one of my friends about this panel and told her that one of her previous big law firms was on this list that I found of firms considered leaders in the parental leave space, she really just laughed. She said there was no chance any news of pregnancy on her team would be considered good news. And she even told me that she knew one person on their team fully passed on his paternity leave when his child was born, because he knew that the cost to his career would just be too high to make it worth it. So to this question, I think changing policy is not the same as changing a culture. And there's not really a one size fits all that can be applied to every firm. So if an employer is really interested in making a space really parent friendly, or really having a parental leave policy that employees feel encouraged to take and empowered to take, I think it starts with some serious introspection and finding out if your employees actually feel supported taking leave, and that, you know, do they feel supported coming back into an environment where they can thrive in this brand new enormous role that they've been thrust into outside the workspace. You know, being faced with the responsibility of becoming a parent really makes you evaluate your other responsibilities in a really ruthless way. So you have to, you know, it's a pretty zero-sum analysis. Can you actually function in this workspace while meeting the needs of your family? And you know, the new babies aren't going away, so that's not a variable that can change.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. You made a lot of good points, especially if the policy is in place, but the culture doesn't really adhere to the policy. And I know a few people where they work at big organizations, and because they're working for a client, it's like that client's needs comes first, even when it comes to taking their annual leave, or even their paternity or maternity leave. And they're stressed about the project and the demands of the client. And I just think that those work environments can be stressful, and it can be kind of toxic for those people that, you know, you're entitled to that leave per the policy, but the culture is just we're a machine, the show keeps running. So I definitely understand. So Huda, the next question is for you. What about just taking the parental leave? Were you supported when you had to take the parental leave? Because I know you mentioned in your bio how you didn't have the formal parental leave.
So I actually haven't taken any parental leave. With my first child, I had him, like you said, 3L finals period. And I wasn't the only one that did that. A number of other women did that as well. And I think in our minds at the time, we thought, okay, this is the only time where we're not going to inconvenience someone by having a child. It would be our problem to deal with, and no one else was going to be upset that we had a child. And so a number of us did that and had a child before we started our big law jobs that coming fall. But with my second child, I had transitioned to a startup firm that was less than a dozen people total. They had no requirements under FMLA or any state laws. So they just, unfortunately, were uninterested in any sort of support in that regard. And I actually ended up leaving the firm for that reason. My husband was a solo practitioner at the time, and I joined his firm during that period and kind of created a self-created maternity leave. But I was, you know, working with him at the same time too, because we couldn't not have some income. So it was extremely difficult. I do not recommend it. I do not recommend taking that upon yourself. I think the firm needs to step up in those instances, and I would have, you know, been happy to continue my my career there had that been a more viable option.
Thanks for sharing that perspective. And with your first child, that I can see why that's an ideal time to have a baby during the 3L year. Now, going through law school and how stressful law school is, I tip my hat off to you. And then with bar prep and stuff. So I can also relate to that bit. I had my first child my senior year in college, and literally took the LSAT, was having contractions, had my baby, and then I had to make sure all my work was caught up for that semester so I could at least, you know, parent out a little bit. So I can understand what the timing aspect.
Yeah, a friend of mine in law school actually had her baby a week or a few days before the bar exam. Yeah, this is the New York bar exam when it was like 36 topics too. So unfortunately for her, she also had an episiotomy, which meant that she was basically standing the entire time during the bar exam for 3 days.
Oh my gosh, my goodness.
But those are kind of the mental gymnastics we do for ourselves to prevent ourselves from inconveniencing other people. And that's, you know, we did what we had to at the time, and we thought we did the right things. But perhaps if the firms were a little more welcoming to the concept, we wouldn't have felt so inclined.
Agreed,
I
agreed.
can totally relate to the timing because I think with both of my children, I worked up until the last day. I'm talking last day on Friday, baby came like Friday night or, like Saturday morning, because I didn't want to use any time before because I needed that 6 weeks after. And so you struggling, I know I did. I can speak for me, that last, leg of the pregnancy. So you don't have to take any time off so you can use it on the other side.
With my first, I had him a week early. So I actually was writing a paper from the hospital bed so that I could graduate on time. Otherwise, I would have been stuck. Like I could not take any form of maternity leave for my first because then I wouldn't have graduated.
Wow.
Yeah, I really like how you put it that you were really worried about inconveniencing other people, and not like it that I like that you thought that, but I also had my first baby, my 3L year. I was fortunate enough to have him during COVID, so our whole 3L year was online, which I certainly do not take for granted when you're 4 weeks postpartum and your semester starting again. But that's exactly the calculation that we made for our family was, you don't know what you're getting into joining a law firm. So you might as well have this baby now when like you can control the factors, you can control, if you miss a deadline, it's only on you because it's your grade that's going to be affected. Whereas if you're at a firm and there's no flexibility or there's no, of course, there's inflexible things at firms, but there's also places to find flexibility. But if you don't have an employer who's willing to find that flexibility and meet you, it's an enormous burden to carry at home just to keep everything going and not drop anything.
Mhm. I definitely agree. Thank you for sharing those perspectives. So, David, we are going to come to you now. How much leave were you able to take, and do you think the amount of leave that you were able to take was reasonable?
So I had our 2 kids while I was working as a prosecutor at the DA's office. George, our firstborn, was born prematurely at 28 weeks. So he was at the hospital for 2 months, and I didn't take any leave for that, but my boss graciously allowed me to take longer lunches, leave early, whatever, so I could, go to the hospital, spend time with him. And then once he came home around MLK weekend 2018, I took 6 weeks off just entirely. There was coverage, I was working a frontline prosecutor job, and that's the kind of job that somebody can come in and take over your docket. So there wasn't an expectation that I would need to return emails or calls or anything like that. I think at the time, and this was kind of groundbreaking in the community. Of course, there's FMLA, which is unpaid, but we were allowed to pool our annual and sick leave, and we were given an additional 2 weeks of admin leave for parental leave on top of that. You could pool that up to 12 weeks paid. Now, I think I took 6 just because of, there was some time spent initially and stuff like that. When my second son was born, Ezra, 2 years later, I was working the job that I'm now doing at the Attorney General's, and that is public records. And so it's a very deadline intensive, deadline sensitive job. He came home from the hospital, right away. So the leave started then. It was 12 weeks, but it was half time. So I would spend the morning at work, handle any, requests and deadlines, and then come home around lunchtime. and that was also paid, and it came out of my accumulated leave. Shortly after that, I think the governor here in New Mexico implemented 12 weeks of paid leave for government employees under the executive department. DA Torres then followed suit. That, I think, stayed in place until there were shenanigans. Somebody took all of that admin leave, 12 weeks, and then they came back to work and they gave notice. And so that felt like kind of a slap in the face. And I think the policy changed after that, so that you had to have some skin in the game. So, you know, you had to use some of your own leave before some admin leave. I'm not entirely sure of those specifics, but you know, I was fortunate, you know, I in preparing for this webinar, I had to kind of place myself where I was 5-6 years ago. Just by way of example, just yesterday, we have a citizen legislature that meets, you know, 2 months of the year on even years or odd years, and then 30 days on even years, something like that. They're not a full-time round the year legislature. So they have one shot to pass legislation, and if they don't do it, they have to try again the next year or 2 years after that. Paid leave, 12 weeks of leave for sickness, you know, whatever, didn't pass yesterday. It was killed in committee. And so this just goes to show how, you know, 2017, 2018, I was given, I could have been given up to 12 weeks of paid leave. That's still not the law in place here.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Oh, go.
Lauren, do you mind if I just address something that David said? There's kind of this implicit conclusion that if someone leaves after the conclusion of their leave, that they've used their leave. I just want to address that, because I think that is kind of one of the reasons that there's stigma around parental leave, and probably not fair. Me, I couldn't wait to go back to work. I wanted to go back to work. But, you know, there are so many reasons why a parent may not feel that same way. One, the costs alone, the ability to get your kid into a daycare, the toll that it takes on your body and your mental health. If you're facing something like postpartum anxiety or depression, these are not things that even a seasoned parent, you know, even going into your second or third kid, that you necessarily know how you'll feel about until you're well into it. So I think that it's important that we as a community kind of address that part of it, and not, even if it was abuse, even if they did abuse the system, let's not assume that. Let's not
Sure.
Think of it that way, because I think it's problematic.
I agree. Let me try to clean that up a little bit. So here that the situation was, it was a father who went from our office to the public defenders, and I have a lot of respect for public defenders, but it just seemed like he was going to the other side, whatever that other side might be. At the end of that, when it wasn't because of kind of, if I may say, the bona fide reason of having to, you know, having a change in life, change your perspective, this seemed like it was planned. So, but I mean, I want to get sidetracked by kind of one individual. You know, there are
I
many
appreciate
ways.
that, but this is like a general kind of stigma.
Yes.
where often if someone decides to leave, if it's for another job that might be closer to home or might be better for their schedule, if they don't like fully, you know, translate it in the public eye. I think it's important that we work around that assumption.
Yes, and there's certainly ways to formalize this policy so that you earn it, you know, so that it's yours to do with, and the culture obviously has to catch up with that. Going to what Megan said, you know, this felt like it was something that our employer went out of their way to be a leader, and then this thing happened. So, you know, the organization adjusts, they adapt. You know, the culture has to catch up. Again, I don't mean to denigrate anybody or any field. I'm just kind of describing how how the organization reacted in real time.
So I have a follow-up question to that, and maybe there's not a clear answer, which I think is why we're here, but do you think that a parental leave benefit has already been earned, and then, implicitly you can do with what you want? Because I think if not, a parental leave benefit is included in a compensation package. So you're, given this opportunity to take leave if you need to take it. And I think that there's not so much of a stigma if somebody takes medical leave for a surgery and for whatever reason can't come back after the leave, but there seems to be a different set of standards for parents who make that decision. And I think because there's this assumption that you have to be given leave or that you are taking leave, but I think a reframing that you already have the leave as part of your benefits package would really, kind of address this and provide some way to harmonize this.
Right, and I think the answer to that, I mean, we're seeing that here in the state in the debate around paid leave, which didn't happen, didn't take hold yesterday. But there's some of the arguments that you hear. Oh, 12 weeks is a long time. It would be a severe impact on small businesses and things like that. So, if we were to have this panel 5 years from now, we might look back on that and think, it's just a given. It's just yes, it's part of the benefits package. I think we're in this middle space where you don't see that, and so it is possible to entertain these other arguments, and then the counter side is, well, that's a stigma, and all that is fair.
And I do recall being able to squeeze out a little bit more time because I had earned some time off and some vacation time. So I kind of put all of that together to get me a little bit beyond those 6 weeks. And I definitely feel like it was earned. And if I chose not to go back to work after that, which I did, but that it was all time that, I was owed anyway. But I chose to utilize it and wrap it up into my 6-week maternity leave.
Thanks for sharing those perspectives. I do agree that there is a stigma around it, and sometimes you don't know the reason why someone decides not to come back. In particular, I know someone where they were just like, daycare is a second mortgage, and it's literally cheaper for me to not work and stay home with my child than go to work, and the paycheck's just going there and we have really nothing left over. And it's really sad that you have to make choices like that sometimes, but also when you do leave, the stigma that's attached to that as well. So thank you. You all definitely gave a wide variety of perspectives concerning that. So here's expectations. Let's focus on that a bit. And I'm going to come to you, Megan. Were there differences in expectations between what you wanted and what your employer expected as far as taking parental leave?
So I feel like lightning struck with me, and I had a really successful return after my leave. I found it, to be really a supportive environment, and I was really supported in coming back from my leave and making that transition. And I think a really integral factor in that is that I work for partners who are either parents themselves or have a real appreciation of the home obligations of parents, especially parents with really young kids. But I think it really highlights this codependent nature of the employee-employer relationship, and that both parties need to be communicating to have this aligned expectation, because it doesn't work if one of the parties has, is not willing to compromise, or is not willing to, or if the employer is not willing to do the work. So, and then I also think that parents who are in these employer and leadership positions, I don't want to speak for anybody, but they might not feel so much like they're being exceptionally vulnerable or sticking their neck out when offering flexibility to younger parents. I think it might feel more like they're creating the environment they wish they had, or replicating an environment that allowed them to succeed. So I think changing the framing on the motivation variable takes the pressure off of the associate or the employee to have this feeling that you have to just be grateful for the opportunity to be a parent in the workplace.
I definitely agree. I just had the funniest thought. Well, it's not funny, but like not anyway. But when I was in law school, they would always bring like well-established attorneys back to talk to the first year students. And we're all excited. And you literally have like these, and it came from the women, but I thought it was just such a disheartening message because they came on the stage and they were just like, I just want to let you all know, if you ever go to a law firm and you want to make partner, you can't have children, you can't have a family. Your career is over once you have a family. And like me in that chair, I'm like terrified because I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I'm going to have to choose. I'm going to have to make a choice. Like, what is my employer going to think if I get pregnant and all these other things? But to have that message put to first year students, I just think that is so it can be a toxic message, a disheartening message, and it already puts something into like your subconscious mind of like you already stressed your career before it even gets started.
Sure, it makes it feel like the parental leave is more of a favor that you're asking of your employer.
Yes, and oh my goodness, but yeah, were you about to
I
say?
had a similar experience when I was back at work from a parent who did take 3 years off. They took 3 or 4 years off, I think, just so that they could parent their young children. And she did not appear to approve of my decision to not take that time off. So she'd send me articles about what damage I was doing to my child.
Oh my goodness, that is inappropriate.
She once sent me an article about a parent who left a child in a hot car, and she's like, I just worry that this might happen to you.
Because I'm choosing to work and I know how to balance for my needs and my family,
Right.
Because I'm not doing it to your standard, I'm going to leave my child in a hot car.
Right.
Ooh, oh my goodness.
Yeah. So this still happens. This still happens, and it's still definitely something that is kind of top of mind. Even when I've worked with a recruiter in the past, I got a glance at his cover letter, and he made it a point to write in my cover letter as a female that my husband was the primary parent to make it clear that I was still employable. So it's definitely something that I think this was just a few months ago. This is something that's still happening quite a bit.
Wow. And it's things like this is what needs to change. Even if it's like already in a policy, you still have to worry about the culture of the work environment. So, wow. Okay. So, David, I'm going to come back to you. How do you manage your employer and your family's expectations?
I think, I have to look back at my experiences between the first and second time, and the second time being willing to do half-time, still being available, still, being responsive. Of course, I wasn't the one who was breastfeeding and at 4 a.m. So there is that. I don't know if I could have done it if I had to get up multiple times at night and still show up at 8 a.m. That would have been a different conversation. I think this is an area, the policies, like I said, they're changing. There's legislative efforts, the culture is changing. I have to look back on just this past weekend. There's some talk among politicians in DC, kind of using parental leave as a punchline. My experience is that it's vital, it's necessary. It should be a right if it's not. And, at the same time, because it's not firmly established, there is a way to affect policy for everybody else, right or wrong, by pushing the line, pushing the envelope, etc. It's an organic thing.
Okay, so I want to follow up. If you could answer this, what are employers' expectations when a new father takes paternity leave? How does that differ from when a mother takes leave?
So I think there was the expectation with with my second child, when I was doing the job of records custodian, that I would be there every day, at least part of the day. If I wanted to take full time, I don't. I mean, I'm sure that they would have accommodated that, but there might have been consternation.
Understood. Understood. Thank you for sharing that perspective. I guess I want to ask this to everyone, or whoever wants to answer. With your employer's expectations when leave was taken, were you expected to check emails, send documents or anything, or was it just you're on leave, enjoy leave?
I feel it was, and I'm speaking about a previous employer, it was like an unspoken expectation, during one of my pregnancies, I would receive a call, about what's going on with this, what's happening with that case. And I didn't mind answering, but it was like you couldn't fully, the message to me was, you still work here. You're expected to be available if something comes up. And so that was the message that sent to me, because I felt like the inquiry could have been handled without me. I don't think that call was absolutely necessary. And so, very polite call, but, nonetheless, I think the expectation was that when we call you, you still work here, you need to answer.
That is very disheartening. Because that's a time where that's a very just vulnerable, sensitive transition time when you having a baby. A lot goes into it on both sides as a mother and a father. And honestly, the last thing on my mind is what case, docket, whatever needs attention when I just went through childbirth. We're having sleepless nights. We might be having sleep regression and all these other things. And you're asking me about this and not even respecting my time, or like as a new parent, you're just caring about the business or the company or whatever. So that definitely goes back to the culture of the workplace. So now I'm going to transition into stigmatization and support. So what ways should employers and legal professionals take to better destigmatize parental leave?
Yeah, we touched a little bit upon it before. I think there needs to be a culture shift, and I think it has to be a very gender neutral and adoption neutral policy, so that when a woman is taking her maternity leave because she just had a baby, it's the same as a man taking a paternity leave because he just had a baby. And when that happens, and when we take that gender issue out of the question, I think it becomes actually viable for both genders to take it as a right, as something that they have earned by virtue of being at their job for a year, for example, rather than it being something that's inconveniencing your employer just because you're the mother that happened to have the child in that situation.
Whenever I would apply for a job and like, of course, like sometimes as a parent, you love to talk about your children and like sometimes it just kind of slips up, but I will always be on the edge of my seat, like trying to bite my tongue and not say anything. We're having a casual conversation and I might slip and say I have a kid. I haven't done that, but I've been just so scared to mention that in a potential job interview or even a job interview, or even sometimes when I'm already at the job because of the stigma that comes around. Oh, she's a mother. Oh, she's gonna have more kids. Oh, she's only this age. So just the things that come around that. And I just agree with what you said. And it's just a lot of the culture and the work environment that has to like destigmatize that, because, you know, it's a lot of stress that goes on when it comes to like family planning and things like that. I know people that they literally plan their some people do plan their children, but they literally plan their children around their careers, and where they see like a little gap or slow period that they know they're going to have. And I'm like, it's sad that it takes all that. So yeah. So moving along, I'm going to ask you again, Heather, back to you. What additional support should employers be offering or providing for expecting and current parents with very young children?
I think the thing that stood out to me the most was the backup and emergency care options. So again, I started at Big Law, and one of the policies that they like to talk about is the backup and emergency care. At the time, I think it was done through Horizon or something like that. And the policy was basically, if you give us like 48 hours, we'll get a random stranger to watch your kid. I mean, it doesn't work, right? Like no one's going to actually use that, or if they are, they're very extremely desperate. It doesn't work for the average parent or the average person that has an emergency. The emergency happens at 4 o'clock in the morning when the kid's throwing up, and they need to have someone take care of them the next day because you still have a hearing that you have to get to, right? Or maybe you don't have to leave the house, and you're super fortunate that you can have someone come to your home and help you that day. But there needs to be a lot more flexibility in helping parents parent while still having a high stress job. And one thing that I think is hopefully something that we can really do in the future is have like a daycare room set up in offices. So maybe you have to go to the office, but maybe you can also bring a babysitter to watch the kid in the daycare room, or maybe there's someone there all the time. Those sort of accommodations, I think, really would dramatically improve the quality of life for a parent of a young child.
Yeah, I do. Just the need for that flexibility. If something comes up, even midday, and you have to, if your daycare calls you and says you have an hour to pick your kid up, there's not really much you can do about it. And, I think something that's worked well for, my employer and my family is the work from home flexibility. A lot of times my partner and I can split the day if we have a sick kid home. Whereas, if there's no work from home flexibility, then you have to take the whole day to care for your kid. But if you have that flexibility, okay, well, instead of doing no work today, I can do a half day or 3/4 of a day or whatever it is for that particular circumstance. And I think that's kind of the point, is like every circumstance is different, and every sick emergency might be different, and working with partner schedules and figuring out how you can have coverage. So that flexibility is, I think, the number one thing that helps.
Yeah, and Yasmin in the chat has asked about whether or how this has improved since COVID. I want to say that it's gone both ways. It has dramatically gotten worse, and it has gotten a little bit better. So for a long time during COVID, there was no backup care, period. Like you could not have anyone come to your house. With the extremely low rates of unemployment, it was also even difficult to find someone to come to your house and help as a backup care. being home doesn't mean that you're watching your kid. If you're working, and you need someone else 99% of the time to be watching the child while you're working. And that third person to come into your house was not very easy to come by during COVID and maybe even more recently. And unfortunately, from what I understand, employers are now forcing people back into the office, and I think that's going to be a major detriment, especially to parents that need that flexibility when they can have it.
Thank you. I wish that more companies provided, like, for people that have to work on site, because not everybody is fortunate enough to just be solely remote, to have those daycare and like child care facilities, because it benefits the parent and it benefits the company. Because if I need to stay late, maybe an hour or two, I know that it's okay because I'm not rushing across town to go get my kid from like daycare. I can just, go downstairs, the daycare is still open and it's convenient. And I think that employees would be happier, less stressed out, and worrying about, like, I have to be done by this time because I have to fight traffic to get over here. And it also goes back to that cultural environment that you are considerate and you care that I'm a parent with obligations, that you provided this opportunity for us concerning our children. So I just wish that was more prevalent. I don't know too many companies that do that. I've only seen companies on movies do that, and that's but I'm just like, it's so unrealistic.
It's possible. I think it really is possible, and I don't even think it's terribly difficult to do. I wish it would be done more, but especially in the younger ages. I mean, I work a very long hour type of job, and I missed out on a lot of bonding with my children as a result. Even having them in the same building, where instead of pumping, I could go down and feed them during my breaks, would have been dramatically different for me and really changed my quality of life and my mental well-being in that time period.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Hopefully companies will change their perspective on this, because it would definitely be very helpful. So I have another question. How does your career or education in the law affect your ability to parent your child or children effectively? And I will start with Alicia.
It is a huge challenge. I think we've often heard that the practice of law is a jealous mistress, and as my kids have gotten older, there have been, algebra exams the next day, papers that need to be submitted, homework that needs to be done that they need help with. And you're constantly competing with life. Your career is constantly competing with your personal life. And I don't think I've gotten to the point where I know exactly how to balance that. I've never been able to call in and say, hey, I was up late last night going over the spelling list. Can I use can I get a day off? I mean, I just think it's something that we have to deal with. I don't find that my previous employers have been all that understanding some people are, and then there's always those that are very judgmental. She's always out, it's always something, going, because I've heard other people be spoken of or spoken about in that way, because there's something that consistently comes up related to childcare and having to address that. And so it's just constantly a competition. I think some employers are more flexible than others. I think some employers, in one particular position that I have in mind, will give you the impression that they are family friendly. But when you get in there and you start coming to work every day, you find that they're really not. And to speak to Yasmin's question about working from home, was it better? in this was post-COVID, and it was one particular position that I had. It was extremely, I was extremely micromanaged, and I had to keep a timesheet. Now, this is somebody who's been in a legal career for like 20 years, and I had to keep a timesheet and account for every moment of my day. And so I had to pick my son. The school is close. I drive over to the car line, supervisor calls, well, call me back when you get out of the car line. It wasn't like, maybe I want to go home. Maybe I want to, chop up some celery sticks, hand one, to my son, pour a glass of milk. But no, it was like, when you get out of the car, I don't know, tone deaf, and this was an organization that purported to be family friendly, but I had to account for all of my time. And if I just step away for a moment, I had to get back and make that phone call and get right back on it. There was no flexibility there. Maybe you want to work a little bit later into the evening, because in my own practice, that's what I do. I may be up on Saturday morning, typing a complaint, and decide to go to a field day on Friday morning at 9 a.m. And so I've yet to find a company or organization, legal organization or law firm that can accommodate the flexibility that you really, really need as a parent. But, it's just something that we have to deal with, I guess.
And just speaking a little more to what Alicia was saying about working from home, I had a similar experience where it was like just a complete lack of boundaries. And so I ended up choosing to come back into a job that is full-time in the office, because it actually ends up being better for me to have those boundaries and not have to be constantly on, because you're home, you have the computer, you have your phone, and you just continue to work. You might take a break to pick up the kids or put them to bed, but you're still working. And so for me, the at home remoteness actually was very detrimental to my ability to have a work-life balance.
I have an opposite experience, and I want to apologize that you all had that experience. That is very disheartening. Well, I have one negative experience. When COVID first happened, we were home, but then it was like, you can see that we can do our job effectively from home. Like, we're all doing great. We're hitting the great numbers, but now you want us in the office just because you just want us there. And when you're in the office, some people will come by your office, they'll talk for 20 minutes. And I'm like, if I'm at home, I could be getting work done. Not us just chit-chatting about just nothing. So that was kind of a negative experience, because it was just like, you just want us there just to just have us there, kind of like, and then micromanage us in the office versus when we were at home. It was a whole different experience. But working from home remotely, which I've been fortunate to do, has been the best thing for me as far as flexibility with my child, because all I have to do is text my boss, hey, I'm gonna be offline for a couple hours. I need to go do something with my kid. Thanks for letting me know. No questions. Who you going? How long it's gonna take? What you gonna be doing? Thanks for letting me know. I do whatever I need to do later into the night sometimes. If like my son has like a performance at school or a doctor's appointment, I appreciate that flexibility. I just hate that sometimes employers like abuse those boundaries and they micromanage and they do things like that to where it's like, well, dang, like I can't even have like, he's working from home that's convenient for myself and my family while also getting the work done for you. Now I choose to have to, like you said, how to come into the office now so you can have those boundaries. So companies can definitely be tone deaf when it comes to that. I do agree. So we are running a little bit low on time. We have about 5 minutes left, and I don't see any additional questions in the chat. Well, we have a comment from Lubna. One thing I wish I would have known better working in a mid-sized firm and with young children is the State Leave Act and the FMLA. That was not my area of expertise, and we need to continue to have these discussions for young families as well as families who need to be present for their family's medical, et cetera, needs. Also, most state civil rights agencies will have the jurisdiction of enforcing violations of the State Family Leave Act. So please educate yourself on this because HR folks are not always right. If there is an issue, you can file a complaint of those family leave violations within the state. Thank you so much. Well put. And I have no additional comments. That was excellent. Thank you. So our last question is more so for everyone. If you could give one piece of advice to another expecting parent or just like a parent in general about navigating and requesting taking leave, what would it be?
I can go first on this one. I would say to communicate with your employer as early as you feel comfortable, and to trust your instincts as to whether this workplace will continue to be a good fit for you as your life changes. When I was pregnant with my second child, I was working for a firm as a contractor. And when I approached them about my pregnancy, you know, I could just tell there was not going to be, it was going to be, okay, tell us when you're not working. We won't talk to you, like, but we also won't pay you for then. And I just, you know, when you come back, the flexibility just kind of isn't there. So I just had a sense that I needed to make a change, and I did, and it ended up working out really well. I fell into a group that's been really supportive as my life has kind of changed. So, you know, like I said at the beginning, like the new baby isn't the variable that's going to go away. So if you know it's not going to work, you want as much time on your side that you can get to make adjustments.
Thank you.
I think from an employer standpoint, I think it's really important that you have various options and policies in place because it's not a one size fits all situation. Not everyone is going to want to take a very long leave, and not everyone can handle being contacted during their leave. On the other hand, I'm not sure that I could fully give up contact because that would make me super anxious. So I think there needs to be various options, and those options need to be chosen by the employee so that they are comfortable and recovering in a way that they can come back and be the most effective employee at the end of the day. And also a much more extensive and thorough onboarding and offboarding of anyone who is taking parental leave. I've been in a position a few times where I've had to cover for people on their parental leaves, and often it's not well done. So they come back and they're thrust into all the things that they got backed up while they were gone. So they're actually much busier than they were when they left. And that's extremely frustrating and stressful in that situation. There needs to be better planning on the employer's end.
And I would say educate yourself right in line with one of the questions, the question that came in about the laws. I mean, I think they pretty much nailed it here. Know what your rights are, and always, and I know this is very hard, but it's something that I've learned in life throughout my career, throughout just living, is that you always need to put yourself and your family first. Most of us are replaceable at our jobs. Most of us, when if we are out on leave or we decide not to come back, they're going to have somebody in your position in a relatively short period of time doing just about the same thing, hopefully at the same quality level as you did it. And so it's very important to always put your family first, because you can't get those years back. You can't get back that missing that softball game, that soccer game, that award ceremony. So always put yourself and your family first. And I think you can do that and do a great job as a lawyer. You can do both.
This past December, both of our kids got sick with RSV and they spent a combined 3 weeks in the hospital. Luckily, they're, full recovery, happy as can be. But it was tough because, it was a brutal RSV season. And then, you just spent all time with them all day long at the hospital. There was a point when both of them were admitted at the same time. And my wife and I were at the hospital in adjoining rooms for overlapping for one day. Otherwise, we would, switch one day off, one day on. But work was incredible. They worked with me. I think I took 1 week off that first time or that first week. And then the next couple of weeks, it's a touch and go. You never know when they're going to come home necessarily. But because I was able to work from home, up to that point, and we were winding down, we were getting ready to move offices and into transition. They had no issue with me doing it from the hospital. So it just depends on how good your boss is, how good the management is. And of course, if they told me, no, you have to come in, I would have sat on my rights because where I needed to be was the hospital at that point.
Thank you for sharing that. You all provided great nuggets of wisdom, and I really appreciate you all sharing your stories with us and your experiences and just providing wisdom to our guests today. So that is all the time that we have. Thank you all for attending our program. We hope that you found it both helpful and engaging. And again, many, many, many thanks to our fantastic panel who truly made this program a success today. I am so appreciative of you all joining us. So thank you to everyone and have a wonderful day.